$4.6 million. That's how much was raised, supposedly, for children fighting cancer. But not $1 ever reached a hospital. Instead, the money was quietly transferred to a shell company with no staff, no building, just a fake name on a mailbox between a vape shop and a tanning salon. While parents cried, billionaires poured wine over marble floors. Then came the day of reckoning. In front of live cameras and in front of Donald Trump and his son Eric, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett walked into the hearing room with just one folder. She didn't shout. She didn't accuse. She revealed. With every page she pulled, every fact she read, every dollar she traced, Eric Trump shrank. Donald Trump fumed. And right there, on national television, Eric Trump began to fall apart. The cameras captured it, his fingers tapping, his lawyer whispering, his eyes darting, because the evidence was real, and the betrayal even more real. So if sick children are being used as props by the rich and powerful, who will speak for them? And to better understand this story, we have to go back to where it all began. The hearing room was designed for solemnity, polished marble floors, heavy velvet drapes, and flags standing like watchful sentinels behind each representative. But to Eric Trump, it might as well have been a family brunch at Mar-a-Lago. He lounged back in his seat, legs casually sprawled under the table like the polished oak belonged to him. His arms stretched behind his head, fingers interlocked in the universal posture of smug relaxation. There was no tension in his body, no trace of humility, just that signature half smirk. The one people had seen 100 times on television, now perched lazily on his face like a mask that had never been removed. Every now and then, he leaned toward his attorney and whispered something just loud enough for the microphone to catch a muffled chuckle. It wasn't the laughter that bothered people watching at home. It was the tone, the assumption behind it, as if the hearing was a formality, not a reckoning. As if this was all beneath him, and he'd already decided that nothing, absolutely nothing, could touch him. Even the chair he sat in seemed to shrink under the weight of his entitlement. Viewers across the country could see it. This wasn't a man nervous about being questioned. This was a man who had lived too long behind closed doors where bad news was filtered, where consequences were someone else's problem. The other panelists tried to ignore it, but the way he casually adjusted his cufflinks, smiled at the gallery, and tapped his finger on the wood made it obvious. Eric Trump believed the outcome had already been written. The message was silent but clear. You can't touch me, I'm a Trump. And for the first few minutes, it looked like he was right. The cameras panned, the room settled, and murmurs softened. But then the double doors opened, and everything shifted. When Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett stepped into the room, she didn't glide or pause for effect. She walked with the stillness of someone who had no intention of performing. No smiles for the cameras, no glances toward the press. Just a tight focus and a single yellow folder cradled in one hand, like it carried something more dangerous than words. The room didn't go silent because she was famous. It went silent because of what she wasn't doing. She wasn't posturing. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't scanning the crowd for approval. She simply walked to her seat, placed the folder on the table, and adjusted her microphone. One tap. Then stillness. Eric Trump barely glanced up. He leaned back further, said something to his lawyer. This time the chuckle didn't come. The lawyer's jaw had tightened. The gallery noticed. Reporters adjusted their pens. One Republican aide stopped typing mid-sentence. Something was different. Jasmine Crockett didn't look like a woman coming to speak. She looked like a woman who had already seen everything. And now she was about to make everyone else see it too. She leaned in slowly. The room didn't blink. Her first words were quiet, clinical, almost gentle. Mr. Chairman, she said, we are not here to judge a man. A pause. We are here to judge a mechanism. A ripple moved through the room, not a sound, but a shift in breath, like a warning carried on a current. Crockett let the silence do the cutting. She continued, calm but sharp. A mechanism that wraps itself in children's faces while quietly moving millions into private accounts. The temperature in the room dropped. Even Eric Trump blinked. His eyes twitched left toward the yellow folder. The smirk flickered. Then Jasmine reached for the folder. Not rushed, not performative, just deliberate. She opened it and pulled a single sheet of paper. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. $180,000, she said, holding the paper like a piece of evidence in a trial no one had expected to become real. Transferred from the Eric Trump Foundation to a company called Red Liberty LLC. She paused, letting the details settle like dust. No website, no staff, no physical address beyond a mailbox in a rundown strip mall, no services rendered, no record of charitable activity. Just gone. Eric's posture shifted, slightly but visibly. His fingers stopped tapping. His grin didn't return. For the first time, he seemed to actually hear the room around him. Jasmine didn't look at him. She wasn't there for him. She was speaking to the country, and the country was listening. Because in that moment, every American who had ever dropped spare change into a donation bucket, who had ever written a check for a cancer walk or shared a fundraising link for a sick child, realized something horrifying. Their hope may have been sold. Their compassion may have been cashed in. And Jasmine Crockett had just lit the match. For a brief moment, Jasmine Crockett stepped away from the hard facts and cold figures. She sat back slightly in her chair, her hand still resting on the yellow folder, but her eyes softened. Her voice dropped, not in strength, but in tone, shifting from the sharp cadence of a cross-examination to something slower, warmer, more human. When I was a little girl growing up in Texas, she began, we didn't have foundations. We didn't hold fancy galas or drink $1,000 wine. We had fish fries. The gallery chuckled. A few members of Congress smiled. It wasn't forced. It was real, because they remembered it too. Jasmine continued, painting a picture not with accusations, but with memories. Folding tables wobbling under the weight of aluminum trays, the smell of hot grease in the church basement, off-brand sodas chilling in old coolers, grandmothers waving paper fans while telling kids to stay near the fan and away from the fryer. People didn't donate with wire transfers or black tie auctions. They gave what they could in whatever they had. Plastic cups, coffee cans, zippered purses filled with loose change. And it wasn't to feel important or to be seen doing good. It was because someone's child had fallen sick, and the community didn't wait for permission to care. We didn't have charity brands, Jasmine said, a hint of a smile touching her lips. We had neighbors. The room laughed, but it wasn't laughter at Eric Trump anymore. It was laughter at a memory they missed. For one moment, the hearing room didn't feel like politics. It felt like America. An America where helping meant showing up, not dressing up. But the warmth didn't last, because Jasmine's voice changed again. The smile faded, and the calm gave way to precision. She reached back into the folder and pulled another sheet, placing it carefully in front of her, like a photo at a memorial. This, she said, tapping the paper twice, is an invoice from a Naples-based design firm. Total, $700,000. She didn't pause for drama. She didn't need to. The number was heavy enough. It was paid using funds from the Eric Trump Foundation, and it wasn't for medicine. It wasn't for research. It wasn't even for children. She let that hang for a beat. It was for imported marble flooring, for a wine cellar. The room fell completely silent, not political silent, funeral silent. Jasmine continued. That invoice was processed the same week this mother, she tapped another page, unfolding it slowly, called the foundation 3 times, asking why her daughter's cancer treatment application was still pending. On the paper was a printed voicemail transcript. Jasmine didn't read it aloud. She didn't have to. Everyone could see the desperate words in black and white. Please, we just need help covering the meds. She's only 6. Jasmine laid it beside the invoice like a coroner presenting cause and effect. 2 pages, 2 lives, one of privilege, one of pain. Eric Trump didn't say a word. His fingers had gone still. Even the Republican members on the panel were quiet now. One tapped a pen against a legal pad, but not in rhythm, just in nerves. Jasmine looked at them. Not angrily, just directly. This wasn't an oversight, she said, her voice low but firm. This was a choice. She held up both papers, the invoice for marble, the voicemail from a mother. This is what it looks like when charity becomes performance. And for the first time since she'd entered the room, no one interrupted her. No one dared. Because even in Washington, even in a room where power protects itself, some truths are too shameful to defend. Jasmine Crockett paused. She didn't rush to the next figure or document. She didn't weaponize the moment with anger. Instead, she reached slowly into her folder and pulled out a sheet of paper. This one different. It was worn at the corners, folded in half, with colors bleeding faintly through the crease. She unfolded it carefully like it might tear if handled too roughly. Then she held it up, not to the panel, not even to Eric Trump, but to the cameras, to the country. The room leaned forward. It was a drawing, a child's drawing. Crayon lines, simple and sincere, a stick figure lying in a hospital bed, IV dangling from the arm, a yellow sun in the corner, smiling over a blue sky. Next to the bed was a woman with curly hair, taller, standing strong. At the bottom, 3 words scribbled in red marker. "Thank you, Eric." The gallery smiled, not out of amusement, but from something softer, deeper. For a moment, that hearing room, so often filled with posturing, attacks, and sound bites, felt human. People weren't Republicans or Democrats anymore. They were parents, grandparents, people who knew what hope looked like when drawn by a child who believed someone was out there trying to help. Even a few members chuckled gently. One woman on the oversight panel tilted her head and whispered, "God," because this wasn't politics anymore. This was innocence, fragile and beautiful. And Jasmine let the silence breathe. She let the gallery feel that small warmth before the storm returned. Then Jasmine lowered the drawing and reached for a second sheet. This one clipped behind it. She unfolded it with the same care. It was a letter, the handwriting elegant but anxious, with words carefully chosen by a woman trying to sound calm while writing through pain. Jasmine didn't dramatize the reading. She didn't exaggerate her voice. She simply read it, steady and true. "Dear Eric Trump Foundation," she began, "we were so grateful to hear your gala raise money for children like mine. My daughter Ellie was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer 3 months ago. Our insurance won't cover her trial medication." Jasmine paused, not for effect, but because the next line hit like a punch. "We called your office. We emailed. No one responded." You could feel the stillness harden. Jasmine pressed on. "I watched the gala. I saw Eric Trump speak with his hand on his heart. I believed him. I believed we weren't alone." Her voice didn't crack, but her hands held the paper with the reverence of a eulogy. Then she lowered the letter and quietly pulled another page from her folder. "This," she said, "is a $72,000 wire transfer." She turned the page toward the room. It was sent the same week as the gala. Same foundation account. Sent to Red Liberty LLC. No medical purpose. No oversight. No trace. She laid it gently beside the letter. One document, typed and heartless. One letter, handwritten and pleading. Side by side, they didn't just expose fraud. They exposed betrayal, not just of money, but of trust, of belief, of a mother who told her dying child that help was coming because a man on stage in a tuxedo said so. The gallery didn't gasp. They didn't whisper. They just stared. Because sometimes the worst crime isn't what you steal, it's the hope you destroy along the way. By now, Jasmine Crockett had become the metronome of the room. Each new number she read dropped like a beat of a slow, merciless drum. She wasn't raising her voice. She wasn't pounding the table. She didn't have to. She simply flipped through pages, read dates, and called out wire transfers like a funeral bell for innocence. $180,000. June 4th. Red Liberty LLC. No event recorded. Flip. $430,000. July 22nd. Event coordination. No venue. No staff. Flip. $290,000. August 5th. Filed as outreach materials. No recipients, no records. The rhythm wasn't rushed. It was devastatingly patient, like peeling back a lie one layer at a time until only the raw wound remained. The camera cut to Eric Trump. Gone was the golden boy grin. Gone was the golf course confidence. His fingers, once relaxed and tapping for fun, now drummed anxiously. Not loud, but just enough to betray him. His tie, earlier sitting neatly against his shirt, now looked like it was choking him. He loosened it slightly when he thought no one was looking. But people were looking. His lawyer whispered again, more urgently this time. But Eric didn't even nod. He just stared straight ahead, his jaw tight, blinking more than usual. In the gallery, someone softly chuckled, not out of cruelty, but disbelief. It was rare to see a man who once seemed untouchable begin to visibly, undeniably shrink. One staffer near the back whispered, "He's sweating." Another leaned over and murmured, "He knows it's bad." Jasmine didn't react. She just kept flipping pages, reading numbers, and slowly dismantling the illusion of innocence, until Eric wasn't just uncomfortable, he was exposed. Then came the moment no one could have scripted, but everyone would remember. Jasmine placed one last page on the desk. "This," she said, tapping it once, "is a breakdown of disbursements from Red Liberty LLC to a third entity, West Horizon Consulting." She paused, then clicked the screen behind her. A spreadsheet lit up. Jasmine circled a line in red. West Horizon, according to campaign finance filings, rerouted over $620,000 into a political super PAC directly supporting Donald J. Trump's 2024 campaign. The room didn't gasp this time. It recoiled. You could feel the shift in air pressure, like a storm front collapsing into the room. Even some Republican panelists dropped their pens. Then suddenly, the chair screeched back. Donald Trump exploded out of his seat, his suit jacket flaring like a curtain in a windstorm. He pointed across the room, eyes bulging, mouth open like a cannon. "She's lying," he roared. "This whole damn thing is a setup." Reporters jolted to their feet. Phones flew into the air. The gallery snapped to life like a courtroom struck by lightning. The chairman slammed the gavel once, then again, then louder. "Order!" he shouted. But Trump wasn't stopping. His voice climbed over everything. Rage, panic, and that signature Trumpian refusal to lose. "Fake documents, left-wing garbage. She's twisting this." Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice to match his. She didn't even look at him. She just waited, still, calm, unshaken, because the facts didn't need volume. They had already detonated. And as the gavel echoed like thunder against marble, and the former president stood red-faced in a hearing room he once believed he controlled, the image that stuck with everyone watching wasn't the explosion. It was the woman who didn't move while power melted down in front of her. The truth hadn't just spoken, it had cracked the floor. And the noise for once wasn't coming from Jasmine Crockett. It was coming from the walls trying to hold back the consequences. After the chaos of Trump's outburst, the hearing room was slow to settle. Chairs creaked, pages shuffled. A cameraman adjusted his lens, trying to focus through the tension that still hung like fog over marble floors. Jasmine Crockett remained still, collected, composed, letting silence reclaim the room before delivering her next surprise. Then, with calm precision, she leaned toward the microphone and spoke the name that would change everything. "Mr. Chairman," she said, her voice soft but pointed, "I call Rachel Green to the table." The name floated in the air, unfamiliar to most. A few heads turned. There was no media frenzy attached to Rachel Green, no known loyalty, no headlines, just a simple, almost forgettable name. Yet the stillness it created was anything but forgettable. Rachel entered quietly from the side door. She wasn't flanked by lawyers or cameras. There were no handlers, just her, and a manila folder clutched tightly in both hands like a life preserver. She walked with a nervous stiffness, her steps too fast at first, then too slow. When she reached the witness table, she adjusted the microphone with shaking fingers. Her black blazer was slightly wrinkled at the elbows, and her hair was tied back in a hurried knot. The kind done not for TV, but for courage. Her eyes darted quickly toward Eric Trump and then back down at her hands. You could hear a pen cap snap in someone's grip behind her. "I'm sorry," she said, fumbling with the microphone. "Is this working?" The gallery let out a soft ripple of laughter. Genuine, not mocking. It wasn't the kind of laugh that breaks tension with a joke, but the kind that reminds people they're watching a real human, not a rehearsed witness. Even Jasmine smiled faintly, not in triumph, but in quiet support. In that moment, Rachel Green wasn't a symbol. She was a woman trying to do something terrifying. Tell the truth while sitting face to face with the most powerful last name in America. Jasmine began gently. "Ms. Green, how long did you work at the Eric Trump Foundation?" Rachel took a breath. 4 years. "And what was your role there?" "Operations assistant," she answered. "Eventually, I handled internal expense reports, staff reimbursements, and vendor contracts." Her voice grew steadier with each sentence, but her knuckles remained white against the table edge. "So would you say that every dollar that came in or went out crossed your desk?" Jasmine asked. Rachel nodded. "Or at least it was supposed to." A few murmurs stirred again. This wasn't some intern. This was someone who had seen the back end of the machine, who had watched the gears turn, greased not with hope, but with hidden money. But still, many in the room assumed she would cave, that she'd give vague procedural answers, that this would be the moment the hearing softened, gave space for ambiguity. And for one more beat, it looked like that might happen, until Jasmine leaned in, slightly carefully, and asked, "Ms. Green, why come forward now?" Rachel froze for a second, not in confusion but in calculation. She didn't look at Jasmine. She didn't look at Eric, who was watching her with a forced stillness that only deepened the tension. She looked past the committee, past the cameras, past the legal pads and the red lights on the microphones. She turned toward the gallery, the people, and in a voice that cracked before it could break, she said, "Because I watched families cry on the phone, and I watched him order wine while we shredded receipts." The words fell like bricks onto the hearing room floor. No one moved. Even the press pool, trained to stay focused through any storm, forgot to type. Eric Trump's jaw shifted. His lawyer leaned in, whispering something sharp. But no one heard it, because Rachel wasn't done. "I kept the logs, I kept the calls. I knew something wasn't right. But no one wanted to hear it, not then. So I left." Her voice trembled now, but she didn't stop. "But then I saw the gala. I saw the kids, and I saw the donations. And I remembered how we'd celebrated that week, how we drank champagne in the office, while mothers were on hold." Her hand moved to her mouth, reflexively, protectively. One tear slid down her cheek. She didn't wipe it. She let it fall, unflinching. She wasn't crying for herself. She was crying for the silence that had lasted too long, for the lies she'd watched stack up like donation envelopes tossed into storage, for the shame that had followed her out of the office and into every sleepless night since. Jasmine Crockett said nothing. She didn't need to. Her silence was permission, and when she did finally speak, it was barely above a whisper. No further questions. And with those 4 words, the hearing shifted again. The numbers, the spreadsheets, the transactions, they were all devastating. But this was the crack in the dam. Not because Rachel had accused, but because she had remembered, because she had confessed. And the weight of that memory, a voice breaking through power, privilege, and polished lies, was heavier than any gavel. The gallery didn't clap. They didn't exhale. They just sat with it. Because for once in a room where truth is often weaponized, it had arrived, as a whisper. Just as the tension from Rachel Green's testimony lingered like a cloud over the room, Jasmine Crockett leaned forward once more, this time with something altogether different, a digital click. The screens in the hearing chamber flickered on, casting a soft light across the gallery. A map appeared. It was plain, almost comically mundane, until Jasmine moved her finger and pointed toward a glowing red dot blinking on the screen. "This," she said with quiet precision, is the registered business address of Red Liberty, LLC. She paused, letting the absurdity bloom slowly. Located in Henderson, Nevada, Suite 206. The camera zoomed in on the screen. A photo replaced the map. It showed a rundown strip mall under a hazy afternoon sky. Jasmine continued, Red Liberty LLC is nestled neatly between a vape shop called Cloud Kings and a closed tanning salon with a handwritten out-of-business sign taped to the door. The gallery chuckled, soft at first, then louder as the image sank in. Even a few members on the panel exchanged glances. One aide smirked behind a notebook, a foundation with millions of dollars in charitable donations. Run out of a fake office sandwiched between flavored nicotine and expired spray tan dreams. The irony wasn't subtle, it was screaming. Jasmine let the laughter breathe for just a moment before reeling it back. There's no receptionist, she said. No operating hours, no website. The listed phone number disconnects after one ring. And the mail? Return to sender. She clicked again. A new photo appeared. Suite 206's door, dusty, sealed with a peeling for lease notice. This is where $2.3 million was sent, she said, from a charity bearing the name of the Trump family. Not to a hospital, not to a child, but to an empty, echoing shell. And just like that, the laughter thinned, replaced by a colder, quieter recognition. This wasn't just incompetence. This was deception hiding in plain sight. Jasmine shifted slightly in her chair, pulling out one final document. A photograph, printed in glossy color, mounted on standard letter paper. She held it up so the panel could see. It was a screenshot taken from Eric Trump's public social media account. In it, he stood in a suit, smiling, hand over heart, beneath a caption that read, "Turning hope into impact." Jasmine didn't look up right away. She simply let the image float in the still air. Then she said quietly but firmly, "You didn't turn hope into impact. You turned it into inventory." The screen behind her changed again. This time it displayed an official invoice from a luxury venue in Naples, Florida. Bold red letters stamped across the top. Canceled. Jasmine tapped the page with her index finger. This, she said, was supposedly the venue for a $400,000 charity gala hosted by the Eric Trump Foundation. It was meant to support pediatric cancer programs. Full breakdown included catering, valet services, audio equipment, and decor. She paused. But according to the venue's own staff, no such event ever happened. No deposit was received, no contract signed. The ballroom was never booked. There was no laughter now. The room sat frozen in disbelief as Jasmine layered the truth one line at a time. And yet, she continued, the foundation still recorded the full $400,000 as an expense. Where did it go? That's not a rhetorical question. That's a referral question. Her tone didn't rise. She didn't need volume. She had the weight of contradiction on her side. Hope promised, money moved, event canceled, and no explanation except the one written in silence. The final slide appeared. 2 images side by side. On the left, the canceled invoice. On the right, the same photograph of children holding signs at a past fundraiser, faces blurred, but visible enough to break hearts. Jasmine looked back at the room, her voice even, steady, unflinching. This is what happens when charity becomes branding, when receipts are filed not for healing, but for headlines. She took a breath, then added one last line. Not to the committee, not even to Eric, but to the camera and to the country. These children weren't partners, they were props, and the only thing that ever got saved was the image of the man standing beside them. After laying out the canceled gala, the empty office, and the children used like window dressing in a fundraising illusion, Jasmine Crockett didn't gloat. She didn't reach for applause or bask in the silence that followed. Instead, she did something quieter, far more dangerous. She rested her hand on the yellow folder again, not gripping it, not waving it, just resting her palm gently on its surface, like someone keeping a wildfire from escaping before the time is right. That single gesture, calm, deliberate, sent a wave through the room. People leaned in. Committee members stiffened. The few who had dared interrupt her earlier were now whispering behind their nameplates. One Republican aide leaned over to his member and muttered something, eyes darting toward the press row. And then, a small but revealing moment happened. One of the Republican panelists, until now relatively quiet, seated just 2 seats from Eric Trump, reached down and removed Eric's nameplate from the table. Not dramatically, not angrily, just quietly slid it toward the edge and replaced it with a blank one. Jasmine noticed. The gallery noticed. And for those watching live at home, it was the moment the illusion of loyalty cracked. Whatever protection Eric thought his last name guaranteed was starting to evaporate. The whispering grew slightly louder. Some members were clearly rattled. One flipped through a binder too quickly, sending loose papers fluttering onto the floor. Another tapped a pen against the table, not writing anything, just trying to focus on the click instead of what was coming. Jasmine still hadn't spoken. Her fingers traced the seal on the envelope now pulled from the folder. The weight of what it contained was evident in the stillness of her body. And when she finally leaned into the mic, her voice came not with fire, but with certainty. "This," Jasmine Crockett said, holding the envelope up so its contents caught the light, "is an official referral to the Department of Justice for criminal investigation into the Eric Trump Foundation and its associated entities, including Red Liberty LLC and West Horizon Consulting." The DO seal gleamed beneath the overhead lights, red, white, and gold embossed like a quiet threat with federal weight. She didn't wave it. She didn't raise her voice. She simply held it there, for the cameras, for the record, for history, prepared in full compliance with this committee's jurisdiction, signed, certified, ready to be delivered. The silence in the room was suffocating. Trump was gone. He had stormed out 2 chapters ago, red-faced and shouting, but now his son, Eric, sat frozen, pale, his hands limp on the table. His lawyer whispered something again, but he didn't move, didn't respond, didn't even blink. This wasn't just testimony anymore. This was escalation. The folder had become fire. The committee wasn't just investigating, it was referring. The machinery of justice was now turning its gears in real time, and everyone in the room could hear it. The gallery held its breath. Journalists typed silently, afraid the clack of keys might drown out what came next. Parents in the room clutched signs closer. A woman with a Department of Health badge wiped her eye without thinking. Jasmine placed the sealed envelope gently onto the table in front of her, like laying down a verdict. Then she looked out, not at the panel, not at Eric Trump, but directly into the camera lens, into living rooms across the country, into the hearts of everyone who had ever donated to a cause, only to learn their kindness had been treated like a transaction. "Let the record reflect," she said, "that this committee no longer holds the burden. The evidence is before the law now, and I trust it will do what this moment demands." She leaned back. The envelope stayed on the desk, heavy, motionless, and gleaming with federal purpose. And for the first time, even those who had once mocked the hearing realized it was over. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't finished. Not quite yet. The hearings were over. The marble floors, once echoing with gavel strikes and political outbursts, had gone quiet. The microphones were switched off. The cameras, now packed away, no longer followed Jasmine Crockett's every move. But truth once spoken has a way of lingering in rooms long after the chairs are empty. Days had passed since the envelope had been placed before the committee, since the final slide vanished from the screen, and since Eric Trump had exited the hearing chamber with nothing but silence and shadow behind him. Jasmine returned to her office not as a viral moment, not as a trending name, but as something far rarer, a woman who had stood between power and the people and refused to blink. One morning, amid a desk cluttered with reports and statements, Jasmine noticed a plain envelope tucked beneath a stack of folders. No return address, just her name, handwritten in slanted pencil across the front. Representative, Jasmine Crockett. She opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a drawing. Crayon again, childlike but intentional. The stage was there. Jasmine standing tall behind a desk, her hair curled, her hand raised like she was holding up the truth itself. In the background, small stick figures watched, one wearing a red tie, another with a question mark drawn over its head. In the top corner, an American flag flapped above it all. At the bottom, printed in thick blue marker, was a single sentence. "You reminded me what courage looks like." No name was written, but Jasmine recognized the style. It was likely from Caleb, the boy whose mother had testified quietly through the mail when no one else would. She held the paper in both hands, not like a souvenir, but like a promise. Not every victory comes with headlines. Some arrive folded and silent, drawn by children who watched history and felt seen for the very first time. The camera pans slowly, past headlines tacked to a bulletin board. Charity watchdogs call for sweeping reform. DOJ confirms probe into foundation abuse. Children's Hospital releases statement, "We stand with Crockett." In the background, voices from the country whisper, echoing what can no longer be unheard. Jasmine walks alone down a corridor, a copy of the DOJ referral under one arm, Caleb's drawing tucked in the other. There is no press swarm, no marching band. Just the sound of footsteps and the weight of truth carried forward. Then a voice, not hers, not anyone's in particular, rises over the images like a quiet challenge to the viewer. If billionaires steal from sick children, and one woman dares to stop them, will we call it politics, or will we finally call it justice? The characters depicted in this story, including Jasmine Crockett, Donald Trump, and Eric Trump, are entirely fictional and do not represent real individuals or events. This narrative is a work of dramatized storytelling created for educational and entertainment purposes only. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think, don't forget to subscribe to my channel so I can keep bringing you more powerful stories that speak truth to power and shine a light on injustice. Your support helps keep these voices alive. Subscribe now and join the community that believes stories can change the world.